What's up everybody, Matt Maran here for another car review. This is of course the 2006 Mini Cooper S John Cooper Works Edition. Huge thanks to Connor of Cars with Connor for allowing me to review his very cool little Mini Cooper S John Cooper Works for you guys today. So, about the 2006 Minis. Well, this was the last year of the R53 generation, and so by this point they had gotten most of the bugs worked out. So the 2005s and 2006s are some of the most desirable ones, and then this John Cooper Works is even more desirable. The only one that's even hotter than this is the GP version, which is even more rare. But these John Cooper Works were a really nice upgrade over the normal factory S, and so you have 40 more horsepower over a regular S, and you know, a sportier exhaust, better brakes, all these types of little enhancements. And so it looks very cool. I still love the R53. I think they knocked it out of the park from the very beginning with the first generation of these Minis. You know, it was still, you know, a little bit bigger than the old ones from the 60s, but it was very true to its roots. And I especially loved, you know, these ones had the Supercharger, so you had the scoop there in the front that, you know, cooled off that Supercharger, and just a very cool look while still having some BMW influence there in the headlights and things like that. But especially in British Racing Green, it just looked so good and so right. And he's also added some stripes here, as well as this fender appearance here with the checkers, which looks very, very cool. But, you know, I just love how it's, you know, on these little 205 wide tires, yet it still handles like a go-kart. And I just love the very boxy and short wheelbase you have here. You know, going down to the sides, they're just nice and square, and again, looks much like the old Minis. And, you know, I had an R56 myself, and so those ones got a little bit bigger, but were still also very boxy. But I think the R53 was even a little more pure than those were. And then out back, you know, just very simple, nice hatchback design. And then you have, you know, just the middle exhaust there, which are the John Cooper Works exclusive exhaust, which gives us a nicer sound than a regular S as well. And so overall, yeah, I think it's just a very timeless look. And even though this car is 13 years old or so, I think it's aged really well. And aside from, you know, a little bit of peeling paint and stuff here and there, it looks fantastic still. Right, so the interior here of the R53 Minis, well, again, it's a little bit of a smaller dimensions, but because it's so boxy, you have a good amount of space in here. So, you know, anyway, first thing, sitting down in these seats, you have some nicely bolstered seats here that have, you know, some pretty decent torso bolstering, and I really like the thigh support. It's actually, it comes up pretty far there, and they're pretty comfortable seats as well. And so, yeah, no complaints there. The steering wheel is also really great, has an awesome 9-3 grip, nice, pretty big 10 and 2 notches, just a few buttons here on it. Thankfully, you know, again, being a vehicle from 13 years ago, it's not cluttered with buttons like modern steering wheels. So really nice and simple there. And then the gauges. The gauges are probably my favorite part of the interior in these Minis. You know, I love how you just have the tack pod there in the middle here. And then this one has aftermarket gauge pods here as well from Pro Sports. You have a boost gauge and a voltage gauge there. And so great to have those as well, because otherwise you didn't get a factory boost gauge in these usually. And so having that's nice. But I just love the tack front and center, and a little digital speedometer there built into it too. But of course, you have the center mounted speedometer here, which is so cool. It did get bigger for the newer versions, and then eventually they just got rid of it altogether in favor of a navigation screen and, you know, the newest ones here. But back then, no worries whatsoever. Just a basic radio, so you were able to have this nice big speedometer, which I think is very cool. And again, goes back to the originals. I think it's a really great touch. But the radio here is just, you know, pretty straightforward. It does have the bones of a traditional BMW stereo from this time. So, you know, it's the orange backlighting and, you know, just a few buttons there, but wonderfully simple. And then you have that row of toggle switches, which you now still see in the brand new Minis as well. And so that was something that was started here with the original ones, and looks great. And just a few buttons there, you know, like your window switches and things like that. But they all have a pretty good feel to them too. I mean, this one's got, you know, about over 130,000 miles, and still, you know, everything feels pretty solid. Obviously you can see some wear and tear, but that's, you know, average of any kind of vehicle with this mileage, especially from BMW. You know, they had things where the finishes would just wear off, and, you know, plastics and things that would be squeaky and rattly and stuff. So that's pretty par for the course when it comes to vehicles from BMW of this generation. But one thing though, you know, they did a pretty good job with storage space here in these Minis back then. Again, despite the small dimensions, you have a pretty large pocket here in the door, although it is slightly obscured just because of the way they designed this. But I think it's very kind of funky and unique for the styling of that. But a good amount of space though. And in the center here, in front of the shifter, you'll see another pretty deep storage space there, as well as two little cup holders there. And you also have this center armrest that doesn't have a cover on it anymore, but you do have a nice little space space in there as well. And so, you know, again, for a vehicle this small, they actually did a pretty good job with storage, and there's even some sporty brand new cars that have less storage space than this. So they did a good job with that. Backseat space in the Minis, though, is one area where you know, you have a good amount of headroom, so you have that going for you. Legroom is okay. You do have cutouts in the backs of the seats there, but still is going to be cramped for someone, you know, like my size, 5'9". But, you know, you could put someone back there in a pinch, but I wouldn't recommend it, you know, too often. But nice to have that, you know, capacity anyway, if you'd like it. And so overall, you know, it's a cozy, but a very nice place to be. All right, so start them and go for a drive. The Mini Cooper S here of this generation, the R53s, have this nice key, you know, just it's all kind of combined right in the actual key itself, which is great. But yeah, you just have the little remote here on to lock and unlock. But anyway, you just still put the key in the slot, twist it, and it starts right up. All right, so setting off here in the Mini Cooper S, John Cooper Works. So first thing you notice, I think the first thing that I'm noticing is you have a pretty stiff clutch pedal for the first like quarter of it, and that's where most of the engagement happens, it seems. And then, but it's a very easy clutch to use. Shifter has nice long throws, but it's very precise so far too. And I like the longer throw. It's kind of a, it goes back to the retro vibe. Other things here. It's obviously a very easy vehicle to drive. It's very good visibility-wise. You have pretty thin A-pillars and nice large windshield, again, because of the boxy design and everything. So, I mean, very, very easy to drive. And of course, because it's so small too, it's very easy to place in your lane. Obviously, super easy to park, all those types of things. It makes for a really great city car. Other things to note here, you have very responsive throttle. That's one thing I think this has over all the newer versions of the Minis is, you know, since you have the Supercharger, you don't have anything to wait around for like you do with the turbo versions that came later. And so, you know, there's a little bit of typical BMW tip-in where you have a little bit of dead travel, but then as soon as you get beyond that point, then it's very, very responsive. But let's turn down onto this back road here and see how it does. And here we go. Listen to that! Oh, that sounds awesome. And it's a good amount of power too. It's really fun to... Oh, I just love that sound. And these shift lights he has really makes it even more of a dramatic experience. Because as you get closer to the red line, those start to illuminate, and that's so cool. But anyway, so the John Cooper Works version of the Minis here does 207 horsepower and 180 pound-feet of torque here. So it was about 40 more horsepower over the regular engine. It's a 1.6 liter supercharged 4-cylinder, by the way. It's just so unique. You know, you have obviously supercharged V8 muscle cars and stuff, and this is a root style supercharger, so it's a similar type of setup, but this just, it's so unique having it on a 4-cylinder. And I mean, I don't think there's been another production car in a long time that's had a supercharged 4-cylinder like this, aside from I think Volvo doing the supercharging and turboing on their new 4-cylinder. But it just makes for such a unique driving experience, and it's a good amount of power. 0 to 60 back when these were new were about 6.5 seconds, although that was a BMW claim, so usually that was overly conservative. Realistically, it seems like people were pretty close to 6 seconds flat in these, and I believe it. It really has a lot of punch. And you get some nice little burbles from the exhaust, a little bit of exhaust sound there. Nothing crazy. Obviously, that's something you could do. There's like people that did muffler bypasses, and obviously you can make it even louder. But the John Cooper Works here gives it a nice sound. You get a little bit of growl from the back, and then you get that whine from the front. It really gives you a 3D sound experience in a way, and feels really good going down the road. It's just really a smooth vehicle. I mean, you have some decent sidewall here on these 205 wide tires still, so although you feel the grooves in the road and stuff, it's not jarring, and you know, it's a very pure experience, but it doesn't beat you up or anything. And I mean, again, you still have to remember that these were put together by BMW, so even though they are very light, these are only about 2,500 pounds or so. I think 2,513 is the number I saw online. It's nicely damped, it's nicely insulated in here. You don't have a ton of wind noise or road noise, really. So fun because it's so approachable and it's really good. So some of the other enhancements you got with the John Cooper Works, for example, you had a limited slip differential, and so that helped you to put down the power better. So coming out of corners and stuff, you weren't trying to spin the inside front tire there or anything. And you know, there's a lot of stuff that they did obviously to compensate for the higher power numbers. You had larger injectors, they reworked the heads. Of course, like I said, you had the freer flowing exhaust. You also had a freer flowing intake with the John Cooper Works. And back in the day, it was about a $6,300 upcharge for the John Cooper Works. So, you know, on a vehicle that, you know, was in the mid-20s, $6,300 is a big jump up. But again, 40 horsepower is also a pretty big jump for a vehicle that only weighs 2,500 pounds. And yeah, so we're out on these rural back roads and going around a couple of corners here. Nothing too sharp yet, but you know, it's a very flat handling feel. I mean, of course, these are going to feel like go-karts, and considering how low the weight is, how you have a nice low center of gravity, it's a nice small vehicle, small, you know, short wheelbase, all that kind of stuff. It makes for a really great formula. And I think the R53 was hands down the best handling of the bunch, at least as far as handling feel goes. It makes for a fun experience. I love vehicles like this that, one, are small but are just light and have a good amount of power, but you know, not too much power. This is the type of vehicle you can ring it out, you can take it to red line and not immediately be doing illegal speeds like you are in a lot of modern vehicles. And so you can feel like you're pushing this and you're still, you know, respecting speed limits, which is kind of the best of both worlds, at least if you value your license. And so yeah, just more and more corners I go around, the more this feels really good. You know, you have 205 wide tires all around. This one's running these Coopers, and you know, from the factory you also did have run flat tires on these, and so, you know, with the run flats, yeah, that made a little bit of a firmer ride and stuff. I think, you know, most people have replaced with non-run flats, and that gives you a little bit of a better handling feel, and also just a little bit better road manners as well, usually. So that's an interesting thing to note over, you know, the original ones from the factory. Another thing to mention is the brakes here. So the brakes were also another thing that were upgraded with the John Cooper Works here, and the brakes feel good. Now this one has a lot of travel to it, but I think part of that is also because we have 135,000 miles on this one, and you know, so it's probably not something that's brand new, and so you know, it feels like a typical BMW brake though in a lot of ways, where, you know, they always had a little bit of tip in usually, and then you had a good amount of bite towards the top of the pedal, but again, this many miles, you know, that's something that's obviously going to be a little bit different than it was new, but still they feel good. And you know, for a vehicle this light, it really holds you down to a stop, you know, very nicely. Of course, it doesn't take much to slow down 2,500 pounds compared to, again, other vehicles these days ballooning in size. Everything is just so much simpler in this vehicle, and so it's so much less complicated. And just, oh, I love everything. I love the steering feel and the weight of it. It's just very, very sharp. And again, the car feels so eager because of that short wheelbase. And so dodging potholes is a very fun game to play whenever you're driving around in this. And it's just so, so good to drive. And honestly, it makes me miss my Mini. Again, mine was an R56, so it was bigger and a little bit heavier. But these things are just so much fun. And I think, you know, that's why they have so many loyal fans, despite the fact that these aren't always the most reliable vehicles. Now, the 2005, 2006s here are probably the best years to get if you want a reliable Mini, aside from the brand new ones that are now running BMW motors that are a little bit more, I guess, worked through. But these 05s and 06s are really, you know, the ones that most people that actually want to drive these and, you know, want something reliable, these are the ones they get, because they've worked out most of the kinks by that point. Now, they still aren't perfect, and the owner of this one still has some things that, you know, needed attention and continue to need attention as, you know, they put more and more miles on it. But, you know, it is better. And so that's one thing, you know, that's the reason why I didn't keep my R56 for very long, is because it just kind of fell apart, unfortunately, even with only about, you know, 50 or 60,000 miles on mine. And so this one, I'm glad, you know, 135,000 miles, it's running strong here. Now this one, the Supercharger did go, and so that was something that they had to fix and, you know, get that redone. But other than that, it really runs strong and still drives really great. I love the Supercharger. That's all you need to know about the R53s right there, and I think that's the best selling point. And I think even muscle car fans can appreciate this, and it gives these such a cool character, especially if you love like autocrossing. These things are fantastic at autocross, especially these ones here with the limited slip and stuff. That would really come in handy on the autocross courses. And so, you know, like now we're on a road that's a little bit rougher, and so you start to hear a little bit more road noise and things like that. But it's a very, very raw experience in the best way possible. It's also really easy to rev match your downshifts here, again, thanks to that quick throttle and very responsive clutch. It all feels very good. And one thing the owner really appreciates about these is the shifter actually feels, you know, almost like a new shifter. It's very precise still. There we go. I was accelerating coming out of that turn, and I got a little bit of wheel spin. That's one thing, is these will still spin the wheels, and I remember that from back when I drove one, again, 11 or 12 years ago. They do still spin the tires. You have 180 pound-feet of torque right off the bat in these. You know, it's, especially with the Supercharger, you don't have to wait for that, so you have instant wheel spin if you want it. But it's very well managed, so it doesn't feel sketchy or anything. Maybe in the rain it would, but here on dry roads, it just feels great. But I think if you did hammer it out of corners a lot, then you'd probably go through those front tires a little quicker. But that's just part of the fun of owning a, you know, quicker front-wheel drive car. Yeah, the more that I do let off, like mid, like 4,500, $5,000 is when I start to hear those crackles and pops out of that exhaust. So that's something that could probably be amplified even more, but it's really good. I like that it's subtle. It's not, you know, banging and popping like a Focus RS does or something these days, but it's all natural and real in these back then, which was something I think that most enthusiasts do appreciate. And yeah, on these roads that are, you know, winding and a little bit hilly and stuff, it's very composed. Again, this isn't a vehicle that, you know, I'm going to be pushing at 10/10 on the street or anything, because it is so capable. But we do have a pretty tight corner here coming up. Let's see how the body roll is. And yeah, I mean, no issues whatsoever. It's very undramatic with the handling, like I said, just like a go-kart. One nice thing with the Supercharger too is you have pretty good power down low. Now I think these still didn't make peak power, or at least peak torque, until about 4,000 RPM, so you still wanted to wring it out, but you do have a good amount of power down low, and that's something that, you know, the turbos have as well. But in this, it's just, you know, still, it's kind of the best of both worlds. It's more rewarding the more you wring it out, but it also does have still some good punch down low there too. So overall, this motor is just a gem. It's kind of a shame they skipped out on the Supercharger for the next generation, because I think this motor is fantastic, but the turbo ones are fun too in their own way. Comparing it very briefly to some other vehicles that are, you know, about 205 horsepower, like a BRZ or something like that, I think this has more punch to it. I think the BRZ has obviously way less torque than this does down low. Whenever you ring out stuff like a BRZ, you get a little bit more rip, I think, in the top end, but I think this is a little more consistent all the way through, so that it actually, in practice, when you're daily driving it around and stuff, this actually feels a little punchier. And then, of course, this actually weighs about 200 pounds less than a BRZ, again, because this is so much smaller. But another thing that's fantastic about these is the value of them. Like, yes, you do probably have to pay a little bit of money to keep them on the road and to fix things as things pop up, but, you know, these are going, I mean, John Cooper Works seem to go for a little bit more money, but in general, like just the normal Cooper S's, which are also fantastic from this generation, I've seen some, you know, as low as like $5,000 for one that's still in pretty good shape, still running and driving great and all that kind of stuff. And if you want to get a nicer one, you can get closer to like 10 grand. But, you know, these are a very affordable and a very fun vehicle for someone that wants to, you know, start out in the hobby of, you know, just fun little cars, especially if you want to, again, go on the autocross course or something like that. This will be a really good starting point for that. A little bit of wheel spin there. But yeah, so that's, you know, kind of one of the things that I love about these and why I wanted to film this vehicle, is it just goes to show that, you know, you don't have to spend a ton of money to have fun. You can still, again, something like this might need a little more TLC, but you can still, you know, have something like this for $5,000 to $10,000, have a blast with it, have plenty of power still to have fun, have amazing handling, fun sounds, all that kind of stuff for, you know, very little money, you know, compared to new stuff these days. And so that's why I always like to drive home the point that no matter what your budget is, there's always something fun to pick. And so like Connor, you know, he picked this. He could have picked, you know, a normal Toyota Camry or some type of pickup truck like many other people do whenever they start out driving. he went for something fun and unique, and I really respect that. I think that's awesome. And again, like I said, you can always find something fun no matter what your budget is. But I think minis are very much luck of the draw too, because like I had my R56 and it was a bunch of problems, and I had a friend of mine who had an R56 for a long time and had no issues with his. It was fantastic, treated him very well, and you know, no worries with him. Minis should go back and drive their own R53s and kind of get back to, you know, because I mean, I love the new ones. Like I even drove the new Clubman over in the UK last year, and those are fun still, but it's just bigger and it just feels different. This has some of that same character, but these are just so much more raw and so much more exciting. And I get the cars are gotten a little bit bigger for better safety and, you know, better tech and all that kind of stuff, but I kind of wish they would go back to this size for a new Mini, and maybe they will. You know, there's talks of them downsizing for new Minis, and you know, talking about new electric ones and stuff down the road. But in the meantime, if you want a fun Mini that really goes back to, you know, the roots of what made these new gen Minis so much fun and so great, pick up an R53. I think you'll be very surprised and happy with the performance and with just the fun of driving these things. So, oh, I love it. So anyway, huge thanks to Connor for providing me with his Mini Cooper S John Cooper Works here to review for you guys today. Let me know your thoughts on the John Cooper Works version of the Mini here and the R53s in general in the comments below. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Take care.